All right, let's dive deep today. We're tackling a mysterious figure. But his ideas, they really ripple through, all of Western thought. Philolaus of Croton. We're
Yeah.
talking 5th century BC.
The time when ancient Greece, it was just like a hotbed of like all this philosophical innovation.
What's fascinating is that Philolaus, he's not just another, pre-Socratic philosopher. He's a Pythagorean.
Carrying that torch,
No.
From the enigmatic Pythagoras himself.
Okay, so we've got Pythagoras,
Yeah.
numbers,
Yeah.
secret societies. I think we've got that.
But taking those ideas, though, in bold new directions. Really fascinating stuff.
But Philolaus actually wrote a book on nature.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big deal for a Pythagorean, right?
It is. I mean, they were notoriously secretive, right? They much preferred to pass their wisdom down orally.
Right.
But he wrote this book.
And unfortunately, only fragments actually remain
Right.
of this book.
Right.
But it might have been a major influence on none other than Plato.
That's right.
That's right. The same Plato that, gave us the theory of forms and the allegory of the cave.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with some serious heavy hitters.
Absolutely. Heavy hitters.
Our source material for this deep dive is the Stanford Encyclopedia Philosophy entry on Philolaus.
Yeah.
Which, as you can imagine, is quite scholarly.
It is.
But don't worry, we're here to kind of break it down and uncover the philosophical gems hidden within.
Exactly. We're going to unpack his core ideas, right? So his unique view of the cosmos, his take on knowledge, and even what he thought about, the human soul, all based on these tantalizing fragments.
Yeah, based on the fragments. Let's start with what we know about the man himself. It seems like Philolaus' life was as mysterious as his ideas.
It really was.
He lived from about 470 to 385 BC, making him a contemporary of Socrates. He hailed from Croton in southern Italy, a major center of Pythagorean thought.
Right, but even the basic details of his life are, debated. Some sources say that he, later moved to Tarentum, possibly teaching the famous Archytas, another prominent Pythagorean. But sifting fact from fiction with, these early Pythagoreans, it's a real challenge. I mean, there were just tons of forgeries circulating, even in ancient times.
It's like a philosophical detective story.
It really is.
Luckily, we have scholars like Walter Burkert who've dedicated their lives to separating the genuine Philolaus fragments from the fakes.
Huge, huge help. So what do these authentic fragments tell us about his philosophy? What were his big ideas?
Yeah, what were they?
Well, one of the most striking is his concept of limiters and unlimiteds. So unlike other pre-Socratics who focused on a single, element like water or fire, Philolaus, he argued that reality is composed of two fundamental principles, limiters and unlimited.
Limiters and unlimiteds. Okay, that sounds intriguing but a bit abstract. What do you mean by those terms? Break it down for us.
Yeah, so think of it this way. Unlimiteds are the continuous, boundless aspects of reality. They're like the raw material of existence, right? Lacking any inherent structure or form. So this includes the traditional elements, earth, air, fire, water, but also things like space and time.
So unlimiteds are like the potential for things to exist, but they're formless and undefined. It's all just kind of like swirling around until the limiters come in.
Exactly. Limiters are what give shape and definition to the unlimiteds.
Okay.
They impose boundary, structure, form. So think of shapes, ratios, proportions, anything that, introduces order and differentiation into the formless chaos of the unlimiteds.
So if unlimiteds are the clay, then limiters are the sculptor's hands molding that clay into something, recognizable.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And what's really groundbreaking here is that for Philolaus, both limiters and unlimiteds, they're equally fundamental to reality.
Right.
You can't have one without the other.
Hold on. So he's saying that the structure of things is just as important as the stuff they're made of. That's pretty deep. I mean, most pre-Socratics were trying to figure out what the fundamental, substance of reality was. But Philolaus is adding this whole other layer of structure and form.
Exactly. And this brings us to his third key concept, one that's intimately connected to limiters and unlimiteds, harmonia. But don't think of this as some vague notion of good vibes. This is harmonia with a capital H, a precise, mathematically governed fitting together of limiters and unlimiteds.
Okay. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. I'm sensing a connection to the whole, Pythagorean number obsession here. Tell me more about this this Philolaus version of harmonia.
Well, his key example of harmonia, and this might blow your mind, is a musical scale.
Okay.
Specifically the diatonic scale, which, fun fact, is the same one that Plato later used to, build his world soul in the Timaeus.
Whoa. That's quite a link. But I'm no music theorist.
Right.
Explain how a musical scale embodies this concept of harmonia.
Sure, so think about it, right? A musical scale takes this unlimited continuum of sound, right? And divides it up using specific intervals, right? Like octave, fifth, fourth, and so on. But those intervals, they aren't random.
Right.
They're based on precise mathematical ratios between the notes.
Oh, wow.
And it's the precise fitting together of these intervals, the limiters,
Right.
within the unlimited continuum of sound that creates the harmonia that we experience as, like, a beautiful, ordered musical scale.
So he's saying that the pleasing sound of a musical scale is actually a result of underlying mathematical order.
Exactly.
It's like math is the secret ingredient that makes music work.
Exactly. And for Philolaus, this wasn't just about music, right? He believed that this same principle of harmonia, this precise mathematically governed fitting together applied to, the entire universe. The cosmos itself was like a giant, perfectly tuned musical composition structured according to, harmonious mathematical principles.
That's pretty heady stuff. It's like he's saying that the universe is literally singing a mathematical song.
That's a great way to put it.
No wonder Plato was paying attention. This brings up another key aspect of Philolaus' philosophy, his view of knowledge.
Absolutely. So for Philolaus, true knowledge wasn't just about, observing the world around us. It was about understanding the underlying mathematical principles that governed it.
Okay.
So to truly know something, it meant to grasp, like, its mathematical underpinnings. Numbers weren't just symbols. They were the key to unlocking the secrets of reality.
So knowledge is power, and power lies in numbers. It sounds like he's saying that math is the language of the universe itself.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Remember the musical scale. To truly understand it, you need to know the ratios. You don't just, hear the sounds. It's about going, beyond that surface level and grasping that deeper, mathematical structure.
That makes me wonder, though, did Philolaus think that only mathematicians could truly know things?
It's a good question.
I mean, that seems a bit extreme, even for a Pythagorean.
And one that scholars, debate. He does talk about having number as a way of knowing, which does sound very mathematical.
Right.
But some interpret this more broadly, suggesting that it's not just about, crunching numbers. It's about understanding the underlying, relationships and patterns that order things, even if we can't, express them in equations.
Wow, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the math itself, but about seeing the order and structure beneath the surface of things.
Yes.
The harmonia, that opens up his ideas to a lot more people.
Right. And this leads us to what might be, Philolaus's most revolutionary idea, his model of the cosmos.
Okay.
And let me tell you, this is where things get truly wild.
Okay, hit me with it. I'm all ears.
Philolaus was the first to propose that Earth is not the center of the universe.
Hold up. Wait a minute. He's saying this back in the 5th century BC. That's crazy. Everyone knew that the Earth was the center of everything.
I know, right? It was a radical idea for his time.
Yeah.
In Philolaus' system, 10 heavenly bodies.
Okay.
The fixed stars, the 5 planets, the sun, the moon, Earth, and...
And don't leave me hanging.
Mm-hmm.
What's the 10th celestial body?
A mysterious counter-Earth.
A counter-Earth.
All of these revolve around a central fire, which he believed was the true heart of the cosmos.
What in the philosophical world is that all about?
I know.
What's he doing with this counter-Earth? And if the Earth isn't at the center, where is it in this cosmic dance?
Those are great questions, and to answer them, we'll need to delve a little deeper into the wild world of Philolaus' astronomical system. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive.
All right, so let's unpack this cosmic mystery. We left off with Philolaus' mind-blowing idea that Earth, it's not the center of the universe.
Right.
Instead, it's part of this, 10-body system, revolving around a central fire. And to top it off, there's this whole other Earth we never see.
The counter-Earth.
The counter-Earth. It's enough to make your head spin.
It is a lot to take in. It's like he's challenging everything we think we know about, our place in the cosmos. But let's break it down and see how he pieces this, astronomical puzzle together.
Okay, first things first. The counter-Earth. Why add this, unseen twin to his model? It seems a bit out there, even for someone as radical as Philolaus.
Well, there are a few interpretations. Aristotle, who studied Philolaus' work closely, he suggested it was all about numerology.
Sure.
Remember that Pythagoreans were obsessed with the number 10.
Right.
They saw it as a symbol of perfection and completeness.
Right, 10 celestial bodies for the perfect number 10. But that seems a bit forcing the universe to fit his numerical preferences.
Right.
Was Philolaus really that driven by numerology, or could there be a more practical reason for this counter-Earth?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. Recent scholarship, it suggests that the counter-Earth might actually serve an astronomical purpose, helping to explain certain lunar eclipses.
Really? I'm not seeing the connection. How can a hidden planet explain eclipses?
Okay, so think about it. In Philolaus' system, Earth is always facing away from the central fire.
Right.
That's why we never see it. And since the counter-Earth is always, opposite us,
Right.
it's also hidden from view.
Okay, so we've got these two Earths doing a cosmic tango, always keeping their backs to the central fire. But how does that explain eclipses?
Well, if Earth is always facing away from the central fire, it can't be Earth that's casting the shadow on the moon during a lunar eclipse. Something else has to be blocking the sunlight, right?
Ah, I see where you're going with this. Yeah. The counter-Earth, being on the opposite side of the central fire, could perfectly block the sunlight from hitting the moon, creating a lunar eclipse.
Exactly. And not just any lunar eclipse. This counter-Earth would be like especially helpful in explaining those, tricky eclipses that happen at dawn and dusk when the sun, moon, and Earth are in like specific alignments.
That's pretty clever.
Hmm.
So the counter-Earth, it isn't just some arbitrary addition to make the numbers work.
Right.
It's an attempt to explain observed phenomena. In this case, lunar eclipses that Earth itself couldn't account for in his system.
Precisely. And this highlights an important point about Philolaus, right? He wasn't just like playing around with numbers and, mystical ideas. He was genuinely trying to create a system that aligned with the observable universe. So he was blending observation with his, a priori principles, trying to find a way to make sense of the cosmos as he understood it.
Okay, so we've got Earth and a counter-Earth circling a central fire. And somewhere out there, we have the other planets, the sun, the moon, and the fixed stars, all in this cosmic dance. But wouldn't this central fire be, kind of noticeable? Shouldn't we be able to see it?
Yeah, that's a question that puzzled people even back then. If this central fire is the heart of the cosmos, why is it hidden from our view?
Right.
And Philolaus, he had an answer for that too. He proposed that Earth, it rotates on its axis as it orbits the central fire,
Right.
and that our side of Earth is always turned away from it.
So we're like a cosmic rotisserie chicken, constantly spinning and keeping one side away from the heat.
Yeah.
It's an amusing image, but it does explain why we wouldn't see the central fire if we're always facing away from it.
Exactly. And this rotation, it also neatly explains the cycle of day and night. As Earth spins, we're alternately bathed in the light of the sun and then turned away from it, creating the rhythm of our days.
That makes sense. But wasn't there another issue with his system? Something about parallax.
Uh,
If Earth is actually moving, wouldn't that affect how we see the stars?
You're right. That was a major, challenge to his theory. Parallax is the apparent shift in the position of an object when viewed from different locations. So if Earth is orbiting the central fire, you'd expect the stars to appear to, shift their position slightly as we move.
But we don't see that, do we?
Right.
So how did Philolaus address this apparent contradiction?
His answer was that the Earth's orbit was, incredibly small compared to the vast distances to the stars. He argued that the parallax effect was so tiny that it was impossible to detect with the naked eye.
So kind of like trying to see a tiny ant crawling on a mountain from miles away. The ant might be moving, but from our distance, it looks stationary.
Exactly. And while his explanation, might not hold up to modern scientific scrutiny, it shows that Philolaus was aware of the problem and actively trying to reconcile his model with observation. So he was grappling with complex issues, trying to weave together his, philosophical and astronomical ideas into a coherent system.
It's clear he was a sharp thinker, trying to push the boundaries of knowledge. And he did get some things right, didn't he? I mean, he correctly placed the planets in order based on their periods of revolution. That's impressive for someone working centuries before Copernicus.
Right. Absolutely. And remember, he did all of this without the benefit of telescopes or modern, astronomical data. He was working with naked eye observations and a deep belief in the power of mathematics to unlock the secrets of the cosmos.
This cosmic model, it's mind-blowing. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the human element. Where does the soul fit into all of this? I talked about limiters, unlimiteds, harmonia, and this incredible astronomical system. Did he see a connection between the cosmos and the human experience?
That's a great question, and it's one that takes us to the heart of Philolaus' philosophy. He saw like a deep connection between the macrocosm of the universe and the microcosm of, the human being.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this connection. How did he see the human soul fitting into this grand cosmic scheme?
Well, remember how he described the creation of the cosmos? It all began with a central fire drawing breath from the unlimited void,
Yeah.
like the universe, taking its first inhalation.
Yeah, it was this primordial act of creation, the first stirring of life in the cosmos.
Right. And Philolaus, he drew a parallel between that cosmic event and the birth of a human being.
Yeah.
He believed that the embryo starts as like pure heat, pure potential, much like the unlimiteds. And then upon birth, it takes in its first breath, which, cools and balances that internal fire,
Yeah.
introduces, the limiters, the form.
So our first breath, it's like a miniature echo of that original cosmic inhalation.
Yeah.
That's a pretty profound way to think about it. It suggests that we're not just like separate from the cosmos,
Right.
but active participants in its, unfolding story.
Exactly. But the question remains, where does the soul fit into this grand cosmic scheme, and how does it relate to this idea of harmonia, which seems to be, at the core of Philolaus's philosophy?
Those are the million-dollar questions, aren't they? What did he think about the soul? Was it a separate entity? A divine spark? Or something else entirely? Stay tuned as we delve into the mysteries of the Philolaus soul in part 3 of our deep dives. So we've been on quite the journey with Philolaus, haven't we?
It really has been quite a journey.
From limiters and unlimiteds to a counter-earth and a central fire.
Yeah.
I mean, his ideas really push us to think differently about, the cosmos. But now for the big question, what did he believe about the human soul?
Yeah, it's tricky territory, We're dealing with fragments and interpretations, and but what we can piece together is fascinating. It seems likely that Philolaus, like other Pythagoreans, he believed in some form of transmigration, the idea that the soul, it continues after death and can be reborn into, new bodies.
Okay, so reincarnation. But did he think we could come back as anything?
Yeah.
Animals, plants, even rocks? Or was it more specific than that?
That's where it gets intriguing. Philolaus, he had this theory about psychic faculties,
Right.
which he linked to, specific parts of the body. For example, he associated intellect with the head, emotion and sensation with the heart, and generative faculties with the lower body.
Right, I remember reading about that. He had this hierarchy of faculties.
Yeah.
And he even connected those faculties to different types of, living things.
Yes.
Humans, they have intellect. Animals have sensation. And plants, well, they just kind of, grow.
Exactly. And this suggests that he might not have believed in a universal transmigration, right? Where a human soul could be reborn as, say, a blade of grass. Instead, he might have envisioned a kind of like a soul ladder where, human souls stay on the human rung, animal souls on the animal rung, and so on.
So maybe it's not about remembering past lives or, carrying over specific knowledge from one life to the next. It's more about the types of experiences a soul is capable of having based on, its position on this soul ladder.
Yeah. That's a compelling interpretation. And, if we consider that the psyche, right, so the seed of emotions, desires, and personality, that's what transmigrates, then it's not necessarily our intellect that's, reborn, but our emotional core, our patterns of feeling and reacting.
This makes me think about how some people describe having, a certain soul age. Like some souls are younger and others are older, regardless of the physical age of the body.
Right.
It's like we carry a certain emotional and karmic weight from life to life.
Yeah, that's an interesting connection. It raises questions about, personal identity.
Yeah.
And what it means to be reborn, right?
Right, sure.
Does the soul retain any sense of its, past lives? Does it learn and evolve through, these cycles of reincarnation? And what does it mean for our understanding of free will and moral responsibility if our actions are influenced by, past lives we don't even remember? Philolaus, he doesn't give us, easy answers.
That's what makes him so fascinating.
Yeah.
He gives us these tantalizing glimpses into, a complex system of thought, but leaves us to wrestle with the implications. It's like he's inviting us to continue the philosophical conversation he started over 2,000 years ago.
Exactly. And that's a key takeaway from our deep dive into Philolaus. He wasn't just trying to give us a complete system of knowledge, right? He was trying to provoke us, to challenge us to think differently about the universe and our place within it.
So we've covered a lot of ground. from his metaphysics of limiters and unlimiteds to his radical astronomical model and his enigmatic views on the soul. What would you say is the most enduring legacy of Philolaus? What makes him so significant in the history of Western thought?
I think for me, it's his bold attempt to synthesize different strands of thought. Pythagorean mysticism, pre-Socratic natural philosophy, and even hints of what we might call proto-psychology. He's not content to, simply repeat the ideas of his predecessors. He's weaving them together, pushing them further, and creating something truly, truly original.
He's a bridge builder, connecting different worlds of thought. And even though some of his ideas might seem, strange to us today, he was asking the big questions, the kind of questions that still resonate with us.
Absolutely.
What's the nature of reality? What is our place in the cosmos? And what happens to us after we die?
Exactly. And while he may not have had all the answers, he certainly gives us, a lot to ponder. He challenges us to look beyond the surface of things, to seek the harmonia that underlies the apparent chaos, and to never stop asking the big questions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Philolaus,
Right.
I'm left with a sense of wonder and a renewed appreciation for the power of philosophical inquiry.
Yeah.
Even though he lived, centuries ago, his ideas still have the power to spark our imagination and challenge our assumptions about the universe and ourselves.
Beautifully put.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe somewhere out there, Philolaus's soul is listening,
Maybe so.
as we grapple with these enduring mysteries.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking the harmony in your own lives.